Welcome back to the channel. My name is Steven. I'm a pharmacist and I own 52 units of real estate. So today I want to share about all the crazy tenant horror stories that I've experienced managing, at one point 90 units of real estate. Sorry, owning 90 units of real estate. I owned real estate starting in 2017. I house hacked properties, so I had some interesting tenants that I lived with. I've dealt with tenants in my apartment complexes that were interesting characters, and I definitely had some interesting characters in my mobile home park. So I kind of want to share all these interesting tenant, I'll call them horror stories, but to me, I think they're kind of interesting and fun. So let's dive into it. So the first tenant that I experienced was one that I house hacked with, and he was quite an interesting guy. So when you house hack a property and you're renting a room for $1,000 a month, you're gonna get a lot of transient, interesting characters. So I had one guy, actually the first person I rented to. He reached out to me, and when you met him, like, he seemed really cool, and most people are, right? They're like really cool, really chill, on their best behavior, because they're trying to find a place to live, and maybe they want temporary housing, maybe they can't afford an apartment, for whatever reason. They're obviously going to be on their best behavior. So I remember everything checked out. He had 1 month's rent of $1,000. He had a security deposit of $1,000, and he showed me pay stubs, bank statements, all that checked out. So, ended up signing a month-to-month lease with him, and I did month-to-month to give him flexibility, but to give me flexibility as well. So it started getting interesting. He paid on time for like the first 2 months, and after that he was always consistently late. But he would pay the late fee, right, which was like $50 a month. So he would actually like put this like envelope of cash like randomly around like the family room area, and then it's almost like a scavenger hunt for me to find that money, right? Every other tenant was Zelle, but this guy was like cash. So you just leave a piece of cash wad randomly, and always be late, but he'd always include like $30, and he would give like an excuse that was like reasonable. And I work in healthcare, and this is my first time being a landlord, so obviously I was very empathetic of him. So so I was just like, okay, cool. But like, he'd tell stories like, oh hey, like, I just got a new job, direct deposit didn't set up yet, I'm sorry I'm late. And in the time I've lived with him, he had like 5-6 jobs. Like, he was a kind of like a manager for like a fast food chain. So he'd work at like fast food restaurants. He wasn't college educated. He liked to fish, and I think he liked to smoke a lot. But like, yeah, he just managed a bunch of like restaurants, and I guess it was easy for him to find a job because, yeah, he talks very well, he interviews very well, he comes off as a very friendly guy. So like, he would like get a new job and then say, oh, like, this owner's terrible, and give me an excuse as to why this owner's terrible. And then oh, then he has no job, then he got a new job, and then that was like rinsing and repeating like so often, since I've known the guy. So obviously at that point it starts to become a trend. And looking in retrospect, like, if you are getting fired from multiple jobs, like, I think it's a you issue eventually versus a him issue. But he gave a very good reason, like, oh, this one employee was not doing the right thing, and I think he just upheld rules very strictly, and maybe wasn't lenient with that, or maybe just doesn't deal with conflict very well, or maybe has like some anger issues. Like, he did mention in the past, like, he used to have a drinking problem, and he and this is after I lived with him for a couple months, and he had like other like anger issues. And like, he had like, I'm not sure if he was married or not, or if he had a kid, but if he did, he definitely wasn't in contact with his ex-wife or his kids. So very, very interesting. And looking back, like, a lot of red flags, right? A lot of red flags. But like, yeah, I remember like 1 month he got laid off for a while, and he was just like, hey, like, can I just use my security deposit for this month's rent? I'll catch back up, don't worry. So once again, I was just like, okay, well, I'm gonna trust you. And I remember when my mom had her medical issue, and unfortunately led to her passing, I had to like emergently fly out to like Hawaii, where my mom was vacationing when she had that medical issue. So I remember I kind of like texted them saying, "Hey, I'm gonna be out of state for a while, and but please text me for anything. There's a medical situation I need to take care of." And he was like very empathetic about it, and like, "Oh, I'm sorry. Let me know whatever help you need." And what was kind of interesting too was like this. I forgot to mention, like, he at one point had a cell phone, but he lost his cell phone, or maybe he stopped paying the bill, so he had no cell phone. So there's like no way to communicate with this guy, like, besides in person. And he gave me like this email address, right? So then I just would remember, I called him, and then like it'd go straight to voicemail. I'd call him and go straight to voicemail, and because I was trying to find out, hey, like, where's rent? Like, you're like 2 months behind at this point, which is $2,000, while I was like on this vacation, or while dealing with this medical issue in Hawaii overseas with my mom. And I guess fortunately, in retrospect, he never responded, and then I would like send him an email, and he wouldn't respond. So I remember texting one of the other tenants, because I house hacked 3 units, and I was just like, "Hey, have you seen this tenant? Like, I haven't heard anything from him. Just want to check in, see how everything is going." And then he was just like, "Oh, like, I haven't really seen him in a while, or I saw him like maybe like 2 days ago, but I haven't seen him since." So I was just like, "Oh, hey, like, can you just like peep into this room and see what's in there?" And then like he like opened the room and like saw that it was completely empty, right? All his stuff was gone, and he saw like a key on the nightstand, and like he was just completely gone, right? And then I remember that tenant saying, "You know what? I do remember, like, I didn't pay much attention to it, but like he did grab like a bunch of stuff, and then he like put it in his car, and then he just like drove away, and I just thought he was going on like some type of like fishing trip or something like that, because I think he didn't carry much stuff in general. It's just a single guy, and he didn't have much in general." And so I was like, "Oh shoot." Well, then I at that point I tried calling his number again, went straight to voicemail, and then I sent him another email and just said, "Hey, like, what's going on? Like, we checked your room and it's empty. Like, what's going on?" And then like never responded. And then I remember that moment, because I was like really stressed with my mom's medical situation, I was just like, "Hey man, like, I thought we had something. We lived together for like a year and a half, and then I was very lenient with you in terms of like your rent, and now you just disappear while owing 2 months of rent and no security deposit. Like, what? It's not cool that you took advantage of the situation I was in, because he knew I was out of state, and then took the opportunity to like essentially like just ditch the house." So in the moment I was feeling kind of shitty, but in retrospect I remember thinking, like, you know what, hey, I'm lucky that he didn't trash the property. Like, he left the room in decent condition. He didn't trash anything, didn't trash the furniture, so it could have been a lot worse. He could have stolen my furniture, he could have trashed the room, he could have trashed the house. So hey, I lost $2,000, 2 months of rent, but it's in the grand scheme of things, he did pay a lot of rent to me, and I got to learn a lot from that, right? So that's why house hacking is hard, because you get close to these people, and you want to be lenient, but once you give an inch, they'll take a mile, unfortunately, right? So the red flag was that he was always changing jobs, he was always paying rent late, he would always give an excuse, and yeah, all of a sudden he disappeared. So like I should have seen it coming, and what do I expect, right? So interesting character. Like I said, like, very nice guy, like outwardly talking, but probably a mess internally. And like I said, maybe he could have been one of those, had the signs looking back of maybe somebody that could be dangerous. So maybe it was for the best that this happened, for that. So that was kind of one interesting tenant. Another interesting tenant I had is in my mobile home park. So in my mobile home park, when I took it over, my property manager told me that we kind of had a strong kind of like leadership figure within the mobile home park community, and her name was Big Mama. And I'm not making this up, but that's what I was told, right? Her name was Big Mama. And apparently she was big, but she was very vocal in the community. I guess they all went to the same church in that community, and maybe she was a higher position within that church community, and so I think she had some power, she had some clout. But what was funny was, if Big Mama paid rent that month, everyone else would pay rent that month. If Big Mama didn't pay rent that month, everyone else would copy her, right? So like she kind of like controlled this like mobile home park community. So Big Mama typically wouldn't pay rent during the holidays, so November, December, January, because obviously probably prioritizing vacation, prioritizing travel, prioritizing whatever. It's the holidays, it's more expensive, so everyone would follow suit and not pay rent as well, right? So it was funny. So my property managers knew that they're on site. So like during the holidays, every month they would like go to her house first and ask her for rent. Say, hey, Big Mama, can you pay rent this month? It's due. You're 2 days past due, whatever. And then if she paid, then collections that month was good. If she didn't pay, collections was bad that month, right? So like it's interesting. It's like, oh my god, like this is like the boss, right? like if she pays, everyone else pays. If she doesn't pay, no one else pays. So I'm like, we knew to go to her first, and she had that reputation, and they forewarned me about her. So I was like, that's very interesting, right? I've never kind of dealt with that situation before. I'm like, okay, like, well, it's good or bad, right? If I get her to pay, everyone else pays. If she doesn't pay, well, no one else will pay. So I was like, okay. And then what became sad was, this was during COVID, right? And then I think she knew that, hey, there's COVID, you can't evict people. So like people stopped paying rent, and then they heard about the rent relief program. So they're just like, oh, okay, well, I just won't pay rent for like 3 months, and then they'll apply for this rent relief program and then get 3 months of free rent, essentially, right? You just claim some hardship. Maybe your hours got cut, maybe you got laid off, maybe you got sick, whatever that is, they can claim. So like she was like doing it, and then like everyone else was kind of following suit. But like midway of like her doing her rent relief, she actually caught COVID, and unfortunately like passed away from COVID, right? I think her and her husband passed away from COVID. So I'm like, oh my god, I just lost the leader of my community. So I'm like, how is rent payment gonna look now? So, but even though after her unfortunate passing, she basically the rents were the same. Like the holidays, it was always terrible, and then during tax return season, it was good again. So, it didn't really change anything. But I just thought it was kind of funny. Like in the beginning, everyone was kind of copying what Big Mama was doing and following her lead. So, people like to talk and people like to copy each other, right? Like, well, if you didn't pay rent, why should I pay rent? And what's interesting was Big Mama, she actually owned her mobile home, and she was paying us lot rent of like $200 a month. And I think she ended up being like $1,000, $2,000 behind. So what we were trying to do was, after passing, I know it sounds like cold-blooded, but the property managers were they put a lien on the property, to try to recover the rents that were missing, so that if the home was sold, then let's say for $5,000, then the heirs would get the $3,000, and then we'd get our $2,000 lien on the property, right? But I think like the court system was like, it was too expensive to do that in the court system at that time, and the court system was very slow and backed up due to COVID. So like we just like ended up like, forget it, and just move on from it, right? Like just take our $2,000 loss, whatever. And then I think their heirs took over the property, and I don't really remember what happened after that, but like we're just like, okay, decide not to do that. So that was the first interesting tenant, is Big Mama. And we had another tenant, and it was interesting. His what was it? So we had a new tenant that moved in, and he actually was a handyman that we hired. And typically when we hire these handyman, we do give them room and board as well, at a discount. So if rent's typically $500, we would kind of subsidize it, give it like, maybe half off. So they're paying like $250, or we would just take it from their, the income that we give them. But we had a guy, he was younger, maybe in his upper 20s. And, he was a worker for us for about like maybe 4 to 5 months as a contractor. And he, what ended up happening was he actually, fortunately stabbed the neighbor next door, who was a woman, right? And, obviously when we hire people, we do background checks, we do screening, and, he checked off, right? Like the background check was clean. He had no record like whatsoever. So, and then, it's just minimum wage worker to do construction work. And it was a referral from, Tommy, who was the property manager. So like all the boxes checked off for us. But what we found out was, So unfortunately, after the stabbing and the death, obviously they close off the mobile home park. It's like a forensic scene where they have the tape around it, and then a detective comes in, and then they look at the crime scene, and then see what happens, and then the guy, I guess he tried to, like, he run away in his car, and then eventually he got caught. I think like 30, maybe an hour or 2 hours away from the area. So I think he tried to like run away in his car, and he eventually got caught. So and then he got incarcerated at that point. But after the investigation, I guess it was found out that that apparently he was having an affair with that neighbor next door that he ended up like stabbing, and she was like in her 50s, and apparently she was in her 50s. She was married, but her husband was, like, I guess, like working somewhere far away. So I was just like, wait, so I have a 28-year-old younger guy, basically hooking up with like this 50-year-old woman who is married. And I guess apparently he like fell in love with her and thought like they were going to be a thing. But I guess, he found out that he was a side piece, unfortunately. And then I guess that got him angry and was just like, well, if I can't have you, no one will. And then unfortunately he stabbed her. So I was just like, oh my God, like this is stuff I hear in like CSI and TV dramas. And I'm like, I experienced it in my mobile home park. Right? And I'm just like, oh my God, like this stuff happens. Like you said, when you own D-class apartment complexes or mobile home parks and apartment complexes, you see some interesting stuff, right? Some weird stuff. So, and then I remember my offsite property manager, she would like Google search like stabbing in mobile home park. Because if you see news articles about stabbing in a mobile home park, it's gonna reduce your PR significantly, right? Like no one's gonna want to rent from your neighborhood, but like it never really got that big. I mean, Selma is a small town, so maybe they just, I don't know, maybe not many journalists in that area. It's only 30,000 population, but an article was never made, and I guess that guy ended up being in jail, and unfortunately, a tenant, got stabbed and passed away. And I was like, oh my God, like this is like a weird CSI situation. So that's another interesting tenant horror story. Another kind of horror story is we had a dumpster at the mobile home park. Notice, this is all my mobile home park, and this dumpster it's a big one that we had because we were tearing down mobile homes, and then when we tear it down, we have to like throw it to the dumpster. Then the dumpster people would pick it up to empty it once a week, and they charge you money for that. But what happened one night was these robbers. So we're right next to a gas station. These robbers, they were trying to rob this gas station, and they had like a pickup truck, a big pickup truck. And what they did was I guess they took the dumpster, they attached it to the back of the pickup, drove it up to the gas station, robbed the gas station, took all the alcohol, took everything, threw it in the back of the dumpster, and tried to drive away with that, right? And so we lost our dumpster, and we had to call the trash company like, hey, like our dumpster just got stolen by these robbers who robbed the gas station. And I remember it was like an interesting conversation with them. Like they didn't believe me until like, hey, we just sent a police report to them to show that as proof. So that's not a horror story, but it's more a landlord horror story. And another one, not so bad as well, but we also had like a full fire in one of the mobile homes, and fortunately no one was in there and no one got hurt. And then they weren't near any other homes as well, so they didn't burn down as well. But we had a complete fire. I think there was like a faulty appliance like plugged in that sparked the fire, and then it was an electrical issue, and then the whole unit burned down. Fire department came immediately. I remember getting a text like first thing in the morning, because it's like 2 hours ahead in Alabama versus where I'm at in California. And I remember when I got that text, I immediately called, like, oh my God, like what happened? Like, how much damage is there? Is anyone hurt? Like, what's the situation? And I was thankful that no one got hurt, but I was like, okay, everything's good. And then so what we ended up doing is I filed insurance claim, and I had to show the fire department report. I had to show all the evidence to the insurer, and then ended up getting back like I think $10,000 because we insured the home for $10,000, and then you need some money to clean up the burned down unit, right? So that was another interesting thing of owning my mobile home park. And another interesting tenant story happened in my 26 unit apartment complex. So I remember when I was doing due diligence, And I was actually walking each unit with my property manager and the lead inspector. And I remember I walked in this one unit, and I remember I opened the door, and immediately I just smelled like a puff of like cigarette smoke just hit me in the face. And I was like, oh my God, like this is such a strong, pungent smell. And then I remember we opened it, and then like I remember just taking a step back because I'm like, oh my God, I just got like slapped in the face with this like smoke. So I remember at the time I was just like, okay, interesting. So like my property manager went into the property. I think it was like unit number 24 or something, and we see this guy, and I remember he was like half balding, lying in his like wife beater that was like kind of like dirty, like some food stains, and then he was just literally sitting on his sofa, like glasses on, like kind of in like his feet up, and then like he was just sitting on his sofa, like popping a cigarette, right, like right in front of us. And then I remember like we were in there for like I think like 15-20 minutes doing our inspection, and like during the whole time he was smoking the entire time. Like, I don't know how many cigarettes he went through, but like he was chain smoking, right? He was getting a good pack in there. I was probably feeling it from the nicotine high. And I remember like after I walked out, and we closed the door, finished the inspection, my property manager was like, yeah dude, like that's breaking a lease. You can't smoke inside because it's gonna damage the walls, the carpet. And he's like, if he continues to smoke, then we're probably gonna move him out once we take over this property. So I was just like, oh wow. I'm like, yeah, it was interesting. This guy was just straight up chilling, chain smoking cigarettes on his sofa in his wife beater, and yeah, was just like looking at us. Looked like he just woke up and decided to start smoking like a lot of cigarettes over like 20 minutes. So that's another interesting tenant. And then another interesting tenant was in my 20-unit apartment complex. So we had a bed bug infestation, and I had to pay like $10,000 to get this rectified. I remember getting the phone call. I was at work, and literally my property manager texted me saying, "Hey Steven, we got to talk about something urgent." And I started hearing about bed bugs in the apartment, like, oh, tenant in unit number 7 was having some bed bug bites, number 8 was having bed bug bites, number 20 was having bed bug bites. So when it was happening one by one, I was like, oh, okay, maybe it's isolated. But all of a sudden one day I was like, oh my God, 5 tenants have bed bugs. So I was like, all right, hired pest control, cost $10,000, which is really expensive, right? It's more than all the rent I collect. But you gotta do what you gotta do, right? So we basically treat all the units, and then they kind of traced it back to one unit. I think it was unit 2, and that unit was like really filthy, right? Like it was kind of like your typical hoarder house, a lot of stuff in there. And apparently, we had a tenant who's been there for a long time, and I guess he's nice. He's kind of like the good tenant, the good neighbor, tattletale as well. But he was just like, yeah, like unit number 2, he'd always bring over like, you're saying it nicely, but it was homeless prostitutes essentially, where he would sleep with these homeless prostitutes in exchange for giving them room and board, maybe some food, some shelter, a bath. So like he would bring these people over, and obviously if someone's homeless, maybe they have bed bugs, from the outside, maybe they sleep on like this mattress on the outside, whatever. It's just not clean, right? That's not gonna be clean. So I was just like, oh my God, I've never, like, once again, this is like some TV stuff. I'm like, this guy was hooking up with homeless prostitutes for room and board, and then like that caused the bed bug infestation, right? So like I'm just like, oh my God, this is an interesting character. So that tenant's no longer renting there, left organically, because the rent he had was significantly lower. I think he was paying like $300, and then the market right now it's like $550. So we were trying to organically raise it over time, and like my property manager said, the bad apples always weed themselves out first. So I was just like, oh my God, like this is some interesting stuff, right? So like you see a lot of interesting characters. So anyways, just wanted to share a lot of the kind of crazy tenant horror stories I experienced. Curious to know which one's your favorite, and if you have any crazy tenant horror stories to share with me. But like, once you own enough real estate, you see a bunch of weird stuff, right? Like people will die in your units of natural cause, of unnatural cause. You'll see some interesting characters of all walks of life in all situations. So like it's an interesting business to be in. So curious to hear what your stories are and which ones you like the best. But anyways, let me know if you have any questions. Love to answer your questions, and hopefully you like this type of content where I'm just sharing my stories with real estate now. And if you want to learn how to buy multifamily real estate, some guidance, check out the mentorship program down below. Otherwise, please like, comment, subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next one. And like once again, if you want to learn how to buy multifamily real estate with some mentorship, with some guidance, check out the mentorship program down below. See you in the next one. Thank you so much.